We are looking at basically, I said last time, like my favorite texts around the Torah, and obviously, and it's just like Aaron introduced it beautifully, getting ready for Shavuot, which is the Torah celebration holiday, Ma'amad Har Sinai, getting the Torah. Also very beautiful day today as we're ending here Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's birthday. What number is it? Who knows? 74. Anyone here 74 or older? Anyone remember when Israel was established? No.
Well, I know it's 74 because Israel's a year older than I am.
You're 73, Deb? Not that I'm
I
counting.
will be 73 in November.
Till 130, 120. That's
Yes,
awesome.
thank you.
Awesome, thank God. So it's Israel's birthday today. It's and we're getting ready for Shavuot. We're counting the days. It's this evening. 19 is yesterday, so the next number starts this evening. And we're kind of towards Sinai. So basically what I did is I picked some of my favorite texts about Mount Sinai, about the journey from Mount Sinai, towards Mount Sinai, towards the promised land, how it all connects in. And we're just going and enjoying it. Last week, you might remember, we looked at some commentaries about Moshe having to go down the mountain, up the mountain, down, and being down with the people. The kind of idea was being down with people that are not necessarily on Moshe's spiritual level. That was one of the powerful texts we said last time. This time, we're going to talk about the actual giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And the interesting, of course, we like to do is get a little into the Hebrew of what happened at Mount Sinai at that moment. All right. So let me just say, we'll start with our blessing. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Awesome. All right. We're now going to talk about the silence of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, there's like so much going on. A lot of loud noise, actually. And it's heated up. And remember, we read last week at the Mount Sinai, it's like a kiln. It's got fire. There's thunder. There's lightning. There's a lot going on. But then there's one interpretation. It's going to talk about the silence, actually, of Mount Sinai. With somebody, actually, I know what you're going to tell me. Make it bigger. Let me make it bigger. Hold a second. Zoom in. A little better. Is that better? Let's see. There we go. Can I have someone willing to read in English the text from Exodus 19, describing the giving of the first of the 10 commandments? Who'd like to read out loud? Anybody? All right, Mr. Larson, go ahead. Well.
And God said to Moshe, go down.
Oh, I should say go down. Sorry, go down.
Okay, all right. Well, Moses went up and down. I guess God stayed. Go down and come back up together with Aaron, but let not the priests or the people break through to come up to Adonai, lest God break out against them. And Moshe went down to the people and spoke to them. God spoke all these words, saying, I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage.
Thank you very much. I see my spell check going, God, what are you going to do? Okay, it's a Jewish spell check here. All right. So this really is just the setup for the 10 Commandments. The prior stuff with the up and down we did last week. We're not going to focus on that so much this time. But just the first thing is that some people actually don't call them in Hebrew. It's not the 10 Commandments, really. It's the 10 utterances or sayings, because the first one here of the 10 Commandments is not really a commandment, right? It doesn't say you shall or you shall not. That's a typical language of mitzvah. It says just, I'm Adonai. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's about it. It's like a statement. That's the first one of the quote unquote commandments. First, a little background. And then the first word, I'm going to just use my cursor here over the blue here. Let me do it. Can I do it? No, it's not doing well. Okay. But if you see this letter bet over here, if you can see it, it's like on the blue. The first word in Hebrew for I am Adonai your God is a very interesting word. Usually when you say in Hebrew, I'll put in the chat to say, how do you say I in Hebrew? Who knows how to say I in Hebrew? Regularly.
Ani.
Ani. Yafeh. Very nice. But this one has a different version. Do you know what it says? Give you a Sharon in Hebrew. Verse bet. Who sees it?
Anochi.
Anochi. And Sharon, Ellen, do you remember what the difference? We heard about. We talked about before, right? Ellen, do you remember? Or no? Yeah, Ellen, go ahead. Riff here, Ellen. Go for it. Rabbi Ellen. No. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay, you're allowed. Ellen's okay. She's in Costa Rica time. She has monkeys yelling in her ear. It's okay. So listen.
No, it's probably a thunderstorm.
It's okay. Everyone, so she's in Costa Rica. Okay. Anochi also means I, but it's a much more grand, royal I. It's like Anochi, I. And in fact, in modern Hebrew, to be selfish is to have Anochiut. It's like you're full of yourself. But God can use Anochi. It's not usually used for human beings. There are some exceptions, by the way. We'll talk about that. But here it says Anochi. And the first letter of both of them, though, is the letter Aleph. And trick question, what sound the letter Aleph have? Survey says nothing. So very interesting thing here that first of all, God uses not Ani, but Anochi, which is a little more royal sense of I. Okay, and then both of these things, the first of the 10 commandments starts with no sound at all, just the Aleph, which is this. So before we even go on, the rabbis are going to go off on this because they're going to be like, oh my God, it's amazing. The first commandment of the 10 commandments, the first thing God's going to say to the people of Israel, say to humanity at this moment is nothing. It's a problem, right? Wouldn't you think God would want to say something demonstrative in the first thing? First of all, so before I look at the commentaries, any thoughts about this koshi, this difficulty, why God starts with nothing? Okay, Ellen, what do you say?
Well, I mean, it strikes me that Yud Hey Vav Hey is also very much a breath.
Yes, very nice.
Because it starts, I mean, you and the hay especially is breathing. So I think that the idea kind of is that God has ruach, he's breathing. I mean, you go right back to Genesis. How does God create things? He breathes life into them.
Very nice. Ellen, first of all, Ellen, it's like Rabbi are agreed. You've been going off here. This is awesome. So look, why some of us I actually had a kid in school recently. I got a parent complaint because it's in a public school here, they were teaching about religion, not proselytizing, just teaching about religion. And they were talking about Judaism and the Torah believes in the God of Yahweh. And the kid was not happy and the mom was not happy. Oh, but I was like, look, it's not exactly right, but it is the English version of what Ellen just said. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, Y-H, I'm putting here W. That's kind of the English for anglicized version, whatever. It sounds like Yah-ha-wah-ha. That's what Ellen's saying. And a lot of mystics get into this idea that God is a lot of breath. It is ruach. God's name is ha, a lot of opening of the mouth and not as much hard consonants, like a softer, breathy thing. So this is touching into Aleph. Now I want to just go even further though, but at least those letters have something. It's light. I think Ellen's point's well taken. Aleph has garnished nothing, except it kind of does have something. Has that vowel there. Any other thoughts about this? What this could be symbolic for? Robin, what do you say, Robin?
So for me, I think about it in terms of the Shema, right? Because we hear someone say Shema, which is a directive statement, but everyone that's present this evening has a parent, right? You have a mother, you have a parent. And sometimes what's communicated in silence requires you to stop and pay attention. Nothing has to be said. You don't even have to have the look, right? And so you can be in a presence, you can be at home in the house, and there comes that hush where you just pause and you perk up, you pay attention and you listen. So sometimes the absence of sound or something being said is not the same thing as silence, but it does get your attention and you receive.
Oh, Rabbi Tali, you are going. You keep going. Yes, yes, yes. There's like so much in what you said. It's like also the music is made great by the pause in between. You know, like it's like there's an aspect to being able to hear something. You have to be quiet You can't be filled up with loudness. Robin, I think this is really profound what you're saying. Very profound what you're saying. Kol hakavod, I love it. Other thoughts about the Aleph or the lack of sound or things like this? You know, I'm thinking of Deborah because Deborah's like the consummate educator. But I know Sue did this in preschool. And I remember learning this. This is something I learned from Project Enlightenment when my kids, when Meirav was a baby, like 2 years old. As they said, Eric, you don't always have to get the kids' attention by raising your voice. You actually get better, Sharon knows this too. You get better attention sometimes by getting really low and quiet. Listen, sweetie, I'm gonna throw this towel over your head. Like, I love, and that actually, sometimes it gets even more scary, but also more attention getting when you get quiet a little bit. You know, that's another profound thing, to start the 10 utterances or commandments with a quieter start sets the table also, to add on. I think it's to add on to Robin's point. Okay, other thoughts about this? Yeah, Deborah already said.
I was just, as you were talking, and from what Alan and Robin said, the other thing I thought about was the story in, I guess it's in Kings, about Elijah when he's hiding in the cave, right? And he asks for God to be present, and God's not in the wind, and there was wind, and God was not in the wind, and God was not in the thunder, and God was not in whatever, all these natural phenomenon. God was in the small, still voice. And I had a teacher once who said that was a turning point in Jewish theology, because until then, God was external, and after that, God was internal.
Wow, that's amazing. And that line, still small voice, is like such a wow, like it really resonates. It's very powerful. So an internal, so this also, it's like an internal, first of all, it's also about hearing. It's almost like a paradox. Like you would expect to be in the wind, the mountains, and the thunder. And by the way, in Sinai, described before, all this really loud stuff going on. So the paradox of it really raises a certain deeper quality, and maybe even something that the Aleph is not just out there, maybe it's something more in. But I think is Deborah's going to be touching on as well. You fit. Awesome. Other thoughts about this Aleph? Yeah, what do you say, Mr. Larson?
Well, I was going to say, like myself, when I think and I have to answer something, there's a pause that I have, because it's almost like you're looking for the answer, you're looking for the internal wisdom, and I think it's very provocative, or in a way, that God is about to talk, or about to make some statements and some commandments, but God is focused. God is thinking, and just like somebody else said, when you're very quiet, you can get somebody's attention. But and maybe I think many people, it's like that when you're thinking of an answer, somebody gives you a wants to know an answer. You're quiet, you're thinking about it. God is thinking. We are in God's image. There was thought put into it. It wasn't just God was saying something. Sometimes I can talk just to talk because I like to talk, but this is not that.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm also thinking of the phrase like a pregnant pause, or a thinking pause, a quietness that lets you gather your thoughts, be sure you know what you're going to say. Awesome. I love that also the Aleph only has sound that's filled itself silent. So it creates, but it gets filled with sound. It's like, it's almost inviting attention and something to fill it. All right. So this is all like a cool start. You guys are riffing like great rabbis. Yeah, I love it. Sermons are left and right. Let's look at the Midrash and then some of the commentaries in the Midrash. Who'd like to lead below? This is just going to add on to the silence aspect. Anyone want to read further? Who just read this now? I can't remember who just read this now. Okay. Was it who read this now? Was it, Ellen read? Ellen, or Ellen, want to read? Bakasha. Rabbi Abahu, would you read? Thank you.
Rabbi Abahu said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, when the Holy One, blessed be God, gave the Torah, No bird chirped, nor was the sound of fluttering wings to be heard. Oxen did not bellow, angels did not fly, nor did the seraphim angels chant, Holy, holy, holy. The sea did not stir, not a single creature spoke. Rather, the entire world was still. Then and only then was the sound heard. Anochi, I am Adonai, your God.
All right, so it's just really emphasizing it. And I want to just brought this to say, this is not some kind of Kabbalistic text from like more contemporary, 17, 18, 19. This is like 2,000 years ago version that like everything was a shush, a hush. And then Anochi came forward. All right. So any comments about that? But just move to the next thing. It's just backing it up, just really just kind of supporting. Okay. So let's look now. Two rabbis who I love and appreciate. One is Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, not Harold Kushner, but another Boston area rabbi from Natick, from Sudbury, Massachusetts. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, and then Rabbi Mark Warshawski, who is a professor actually of mine in Cincinnati, but he used to come and visit New York a number of times. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner is a Kabbalist and a mystic, and he's written a number of wonderful books. I'm sure some of you are familiar with his work. He's got incredible work about the Book of Letters and various things. If you're not, you should go enjoy his book, Honey from the Rock. He's got amazing stuff. All right, Ellen, would you mind reading on what Rabbi Lawrence Kushner says about this letter Aleph and the silence and all that stuff? Go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. But the letter Aleph is itself utterly silent, nothing more than an intake of breath. Is this all God has to say? Or does the divine voice in fact make room through an act of tzimtzum, self-limitation, to allow the human voice to speak and articulate the teaching human language? All of Torah contained within the letter Aleph means that all the many words that will come to exist, both within Torah and in the living stream of conversation about it, in all generations, constituting the oral Torah, are present in the divine silence that precedes and underlies them. Gershon Sholem writes, what sound is in the letter Aleph? Just silence. At Sinai, just silence. To hear the Aleph is to hear the silence, the preparation for all audible language, but which in itself conveys no specific. This way, transformed the revelation on Sinai into a mystical revelation, pregnant with infinite meaning, but without specific meaning. The Zohar teaches that that Aleph is a seed in which is enwrapped the entire Torah, and our deployment is to nurture that seed into our life's being.
All right, so he's talking in mystical realms, but just kind of like to cut to what I would say my chase on this is he's saying, what is the ultimate irony or paradox of the Torah? Is there's so many words in it with so much sound, but the first thing being the Aleph with the silence, in a sense it sets for that everything's in the Aleph means it's like it all comes from like all the other words in a sense mystically are extra. The most important thing is that there's going to be this flow of divine energy like coming from God into the world, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation. The Aleph is not just going to come from God to us, but it's going to require us to fill in. I think he uses the phrase "fill in the sound," of the Aleph. It's going to be a space for conversation, so that therefore the Torah is not just what God gave a long time ago. The Torah is what's going to be created for generations and generations. That the Aleph is the space for Torah to exist. That's what I take away from it. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about this. It's a little esoteric, I know. Go ahead, Sam, what do you say? And we'll go to Devin.
So the Aleph could represent the void at the beginning of creation.
Yes, nice.
The Aleph has no sound, but yet everything comes from it, as you were saying.
Right.
And the void had nothing, but from it was created everything. So it could be God presenting God's self as the beginning, and then flowing from that everything that represents creation. Just a thought.
Well, that's this phrase tzimtzum, which is a Kabbalistic kind of word for, I mean, it's a Hebrew word, it means contraction. There's an idea, and some of you may be familiar with this idea, in Isaac Luria's Kabbalah view of the creation of the world, that the world was filled with God, and in order to create the human world that we live in, God actually had to contract God's self and small so to speak, in order to create space in the void. This idea that God actually wants a world, but therefore has to step back. So by giving an Aleph, God's creating a space for the world to exist. You fit, exactly. And I love it because it says, in the beginning, the earth was null and void, void in, what's it? It's a tohu vavohu, chaos. It was chaos in the, right, exactly. Devin, what do you say on that? You fit, very nice, Devin.
So this might be a bit of a departure, so I'm afraid of that. But one of the things that I teach when I'm doing chaplaincy training for other people is how to listen and how to lean into the discomfort of silence and finding the words and meaning of the silence that people are sharing with me or with you or whoever. And one of the things that I tell people is I use the word Shema. So when you're listening to someone, you practice silence, and then you relay that you're listening with and then at the end you say, I hear you.
I love that. Deborah was a great, there's a children's book on that. Deborah and Sharon, there's a great book on that. It's something similar. Yours is more profound and more adult, but that's awesome, Deborah. That's kolakov. I love that. Wow, that's totally relevant. The role of silence is so key, especially someone like me who's a little bit loquacious. All right, did Ellen have something again, Ellen? Yeah.
I think there's a midrash that when God gave the teaching to Moses, he basically just breathed the silence of an Aleph, and that contained all of Torah, oral Torah, and everything ever since.
This is all revolving around that same idea. Exactly. Do you have a comment on that? You're just saying you.
No, I'm just reminded of that.
You are hitting it on the head. This is all around that stuff. Exactly. All right, Deborah, what do you say?
So again, what this makes me think of is another text. When I guess Moses, quoting God, says the Torah is not in heaven, out of your reach. That by giving the Torah in silence, giving that space for us to fill in the words as we understand them or as we begin to perceive them, we're really making the Torah our own. We're not only taking possession of it, we're taking responsibility for it. I mean, I always think when I teach that text, I always teach the kids, this is what makes us Yisrael. This is what makes us God wrestlers. Yes. That this is not given to us, chapter and verse, as they say. This is given to us in silence to interpret as we understand it and to make it our own and to take responsibility for what we understand.
I love it, Deborah. I think you make a great point. And this is such a profound point in general about, let's say, transmitting from teacher to student or whatever, is that on the one hand, there's a natural inclination, and I know maybe Deborah doesn't have the inclination, but many teachers do, to want to convey something to the student. You want to bring it over. On the other hand, though, you also want the student to own it. So you're gonna have, I see myself, when I have someone, let's say Stas Oral, who's a rabbinical student right now, or Rabbi Jama Purser, who's a rabbi. I mean, it's not dramatic because we're still in a similar worldview, but they are doing things with the Torah and Jewish life and what they learned from Beth Meyer that's different than what me or Jenny would do. And part of me is like, what are you kidding me? You should do what we haven't done. No, the whole point though is exactly what Deborah's saying. No, I want to pass it on. And the goal is to actually give the next people the chance to take it for their own and make their own decisions. I often find it very powerful at baby namings, for example. A lot of parents will say, or B mitzvah, will say things like, I want to give you what I have, but at the end of the day, you got to take the wheel at some point. You got to make your own decisions what you're going to do about it. But it's hard because we care about it, but we want to pass it on a certain way. But I think your point's well taken. God is modeling, I'm going to give it over, but I'm not going to predetermine all of it. I'm going to let them take responsibility for it and let them own it. I think it's your point, Deborah. It's a great point. I want them to own it. You're fit. All right, let's look at another teacher here, Dr. Rabbi Mark Wachowski. There's someone else who would be willing to read his interpretation of this Aleph Anochi. He has another kind of take and riffs on it. Anybody? Maybe a new person? Robin, thank you.
Sure. What really happened on Sinai? The Babylonian Talmud, Menachot 29b, suggests this answer. When Moses ascended the mountain into heaven, he found God writing a Torah scroll and adding crowns, keterim, to its letters. What do these crowns mean? He asked. God told him, one day, a man named Akiva ben Yosef shall derive numerous laws, halachot, from each and every point of these crowns. Amazed to hear of such an intellect, Moses pleaded, show him to me. Turning around, Moses found himself centuries in the future in the academy of Rabbi Akiva, where he was dismayed to discover that he did not understand the topic under discussion. At one point, however, Akiva informed his students that one of the laws he has derived is a halakha revealed to Moses at Sinai. Hearing this, Moses cheered up. Master of the universe, he exclaimed upon returning to heaven, you have such a scholar, and yet you give the Torah through me?
I just stopped, Robin. This person heard that so wrong. I love it. So we're just this is a famous story. Some of the people here, I'm sure, are very familiar with the story, but it's very cute, right? Moses gets the Torah. It's a halakha, it's law given to Moses. And then Moses sees this guy, Rabbi Akiva. Generations later, he turns around and sees him like in a yeshiva. And Akiva, when just explaining to the students a very complicated Torah thing, Moses is like, where did he get this idea? I don't understand it. And then he says, it was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Moses, what is he talking about? I was there. I don't remember. I didn't understand anything. And then he even asked God, like, why did you choose me? I'm chopped liver. You should have given the Torah to Akiva. He's way, way smarter than me. Generations later, right? I mean, just to give a quick thing and just to bring in modern political moment here, right? I'm not going to get deep into the discussion currently about the Supreme Court and the issues around abortion. But one of the things being discussed right now in the news, I'm sure you've heard it, is some people from some perspective, I'm not getting into the debate, I'm just explaining it, legal theory, have said things like, well, there's nothing about abortion in the Constitution, right? It doesn't say that. But we already know, based on this text, like there's going to be generations to come of the Torah, that it's not going to be specifically written, but this is how the law evolves. 10 generations later, new things have been interpreted from prior things, right? So this is a very natural course, is that something may not be specifically written in that text, but things evolve through interpretation over time. So in fact, in this text, what doesn't happen, you might have thought it says, well, only Moses knows the Torah. What was given to Moses is pure. But that's not the case. This midrash implies that Akiva actually knows more than Moses. And Akiva is later than Moses. So it's not that earliest is best. In fact, later is also best. You follow me here? And this contradicts that argument. All right. So, Rob, will you continue on with his interpretations?
Sure.
Okay.
Like most Jewish texts, this story can be understood in many ways. Here's one of them. On Sinai, Moses learned that not even he who received the Torah can say with absolute finality just what Torah means. Instead, its full meaning awaits the future generations who interpret its precepts in order to live by them. What Moses brought down from Sinai was not, therefore, a set of rules so much as the outline of a conversation, a continuing argument over the meaning of Torah that began with him and stretched through the era of the rabbis, culminating in our own time and beyond. It is a conversation noted in the divine, yet we are the ones who must complete it. And that is why, as a liberal Jew, I really like this version of what happened on Sinai.
All right, awesome, Robin. So what's he saying, guys, basically? What's he saying is going on here in this text? What's his whole point? What'd you say in your own words? Anybody?
Sure, I'll try.
Please. Yeah.
The way that I understand this is so I've been taking a class at Wake Tech called The Introduction to the Hebrew Bible. And in one of the, it's written from a Jewish perspective. The author of our textbook is Mark Svi Bretler, who actually works at Duke. And he wrote our textbook, How to Read the Bible. Cool. And he mentions, that so many people throughout the years have rendered a translation of the word Torah into meaning law. But the way that he sort of prefers it to be translated as instruction
Yeah.
versus a set of laws. And it's really, for me at least, I think it's definitely a way to guide your life, but not and it kind of works again with that sort of it does have a lot of like legal theory to it, but it also is it applies to your general life, and that general life can change throughout the years. And it's certainly important to apply the Torah's teachings not just in the most, and that does remind me kind of the Constitution in terms of like the originalist perspective versus like the modern
Aaron, look at you,
perspective.
Aaron. Rabbi Aaron working. Yes, Aaron working.
and
Awesome.
it doesn't have to be necessarily from what the original intent was so much as it is about your own life right now and how it applies to your own life right now.
Oh, Aaron, you make me so proud. Amazing what you've incorporated here. That's awesome. And I want to say, it's very cool, the word instruction. I love it. So instruction means it's like a teaching, but law has this kind of like black or white, like you're either doing it or not doing it or something like that, right? But instruction means it's like, it's an instruction, it's a teaching, it's a guidepost more, and it's an engaging of how to instruct, but it allows you to kind of interpret that instruction or to work with the instruction, right? You kind of have more agency. And that's what I hear you saying, yeah? It's very cool, very cool. I love that, awesome. Did Ellen, yeah, Ellen, Bakasha.
Yeah, no, I like this too. The only thing that kind of bothers me a little is at the kind of the tail end when he talks about culminating in our own time, and yet we are the ones who must complete it. To me, that's not true. We move it along,
right?
Add our voice to it, but it is not complete in our time. It is not culminating in us because they're future generations.
Great point. Ellen, great point. I hope there'll be future generations. I didn't even notice that. That's a great point. It's a very contemporary, we're the best focus kind of thing. Like, right, we're the top of the mountain.
Yeah, it's a never-ending conversation. As long as there are people to converse with Torah, be it written, oral, all the other teachings that have come since, this conversation will continue.
Right, so you'd read, say, instead of culminating, you were like, just say continuing in our time.
Yes, continuing. That at present, we are at one stage, but that's true from the past, and it'll be true in the future. At least I hope so.
No, I agree, Ellen. Not only that, but I want to say, like, it's also kind of, this text, it's making a great point. It's kind of a linear way of looking at the Torah, like it's given, and then we know the world is more complicated. Things happen, they go, and who linear is in the eye of the beholder, what's linear, right? Yeah, it's a very nice point. That's good. I didn't even notice that. Kol hakavod on that. Nice. You fit. Other thoughts about this? About I just also like the fact that so much sometimes we in Judaism or traditional religious practice, the people of old did it better. They're more holy, and that is an idea within some normative Jewish ideas. Rabbis like Akiva, Hillel, and Shammai, we're chopped liver. This is not we're chopped liver. This is like no. Like respect those, but hey, we're a part of the conversation too. It's important we contribute to the conversation. In fact, Moses is going to look ahead and say that future generations have a lot to offer, which I think is very cool. It's kind of an honoring of the current moment too, contemporary times, or moving in a certain direction. All right, Sharon, you have a shot.
Yeah, so to me, this is the beauty of Judaism, is that this religion that's thousands of years old can continue, and it has to adapt and change. And I think that's what this is talking about. And I've been studying Talmud for a couple of years now, and that's what always amazes me is how the Talmudic rabbis were able to take this religion that was completely temple based and based on sacrifices and change it and adapt it, and then we continue to do that today, so the religion continues and still works.
It's true. I agree with you, Sharon. I think it's one of the greatest things that our tradition, and I'm so proud of, is our willingness to change and to adjust when the times change. For someone, for example, after the Holocaust, to have the exact same relationship with Judaism and God as they did before. By the way, there are some people that do, but in general, like to not be shaken to your core on that question, just doesn't seem like, but that's why I think it's beautiful. It's that, well, Judaism then therefore had a whole slew of theologians and, people continue to struggle with that, or the establishment of the state of Israel in light of today's independent state. That these things, can we take that instead of just abandoning, but adapt? You said the temple's destruction, and that was enormously humongous change, a horrible moment. But we didn't give up. We hung in there in that continuing dialogue. That's actually the resiliency of our traditions, how much we've been willing to change. Kol hakavod, Sharon. Shkoyach. And I see Devin the Odyssey is intense. Very, very intense. And Ellen adds in 70 faces of Torah. Exactly. There's not just one face of Torah, there's 70 of them. It's like a world. All right. Let's at least look at one more here. My favorite. It's similar to silence, but it's a little different. It's actually a halachic term, a legal term called hefker. Has anyone ever heard the term hefker before? Yeah? Not, you're gonna learn tonight. All right. Anybody want to read, or maybe I should take one just to make it really easy. Anyway, who's want to read a little bit here about hefker in the desert? Why the Torah was given in the desert? Why was the Torah given in the land of Israel? Should have been given in Israel, right? Why is it given in diaspora? It's an interesting question. And why not in a city? Why in the wilderness? Why specifically in a desert? All right, here, I'll read out because you guys seem a little shy. I'll read it out. And Adonai spoke to Moshe in the Sinai desert. This is the first verse from the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Torah, the Midbar. Why does the verse say that God spoke to Moshe specifically in the desert? Answer, anyone who does not make him or herself hefker like the desert cannot acquire wisdom nor acquire the Torah. So I didn't answer the question what hefker is yet. Let me just see if it comes up next. Yes, it's gonna say here. Well, I can just tell you guys. It's easy, and I'll say it. Tell you. So hefker literally means abandoned. Something is hefker, it's abandoned, or ownerless. It's owned by no one. So a classic example in Jewish law is, let's say I have my wedding ring, okay, and God forbid, I'm walking down the street and accidentally, I went on a diet, okay, and my ring falls off my finger into the sidewalk, okay. According to Jewish law, I then can go, if I think I know I lost it, I put it on the internet, I put a sign up, But after 30 days, I lose it. Someone finds the ring. They put it on the internet. They put a sign up for 30 days. If they put it on for 30 days, they put it on the internet. They give every attempt to find it. And no one claims it after 30 days. Some people say a little bit longer for a very valuable item, but it's at least 30 days. Then it's considered ownerless. And now I can take it because now it's considered owned by nobody because nobody claimed it. That's just one example. So the idea of hefker means nobody owns it. It's completely abandoned. It's not owned by one person. It's kind of part of the world. So the thing here, so why does the Torah give the desert? Because the desert is a place that's both abandoned and it's ownerless. Nobody has a deed of property over the desert. That's what they're saying. All right, Deborah, question or comment?
No, I had a comment. I think that's a metaphor for the people, right? They're ownerless. They were owned by the Egyptians, right? They were enslaved. They will become owned, in a manner of speaking, by Adonai. And the land of Canaan, of Israel, belongs to Adonai. So if the Torah was given to them there, they would not be ownerless. They wouldn't be ownerless anymore. They wouldn't need a space. It was ownerless. But the desert, which belongs to no one, and they also belong to no one, it's the place to receive their mission in life, if you want, we're taught that they went into the desert, a disparate group of tribes, they came out of people. Right. That wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been in this ownerless place. So I see that as being a metaphor for the people themselves.
Beautiful. Deborah, you remind me, I think it was you last week that talked about liminal places, right?
Yeah.
And I just realized that the desert is also a liminal place. It's not in one place or the other. It's in between and it's ownerless. You're saying the people are ownerless, I think is a very cool point. They're in between relationship with some kind of greater authority, power, whatever you want to call it. You're right. And that's actually when they can receive the Torah, is when they make themselves ownerless. It is powerful. That's when you're going to get, in some ways, when you're under someone's authority, you can't receive Torah. Like you can only get it when you're free. I know, abandoned. It's an interesting term.
Well, you don't have agency. I mean, they had no agency in Egypt, right? They were
Right.
enslaved, and in some ways, their agency will be limited once they accept the Torah and they go into the land, because they'll accept these limitations which the Torah is giving them. But in the desert, they have complete agency. They are limited by nothing.
Yes. That's one of the reasons, by the way, a cool time to have a bar mitzvahs at 13. All right, we'll come in a second. All right, Sam, what do you say?
Also, the desert is somewhat unique in that land, land's very tangible. Land doesn't really shift. Earthquakes shift land, but the wind shifts the desert. And therefore, it's kind of ethereal. It's not as tangible as the land that's arable. Okay, it's not as valuable as the land is arable, and you're taking away material things in order that this be presented to the people.
I like that too.
And again, you go back into the desert, it's not going to be the same if you go back into the desert. It was that moment in time that they received the law, if we want to call it that. And that moment in time was unique to that desert, never to be duplicated.
You're fit. I love it. It also lays you bare. I kind of hear you saying, yeah, it lays you open. Yes, no, it's a very, very cool. And it's a place in that unique moment in time. And if those of you know, like the Israeli Sinai desert is a very rocky, it's not like the Sahara desert. It's very rocky, like it's like rough desert in a certain way. Brush, stuff like that. Yeah, Ellen, Ellen have something? All right.
Yeah, it abandoned. To me, I mean, part of learning anything new is you have to kind of abandon
beginner's mind.
Preconceived ideas. Yeah. So that's what the Israelites, or the Hebrew, whatever you want to call them, had to do, because they had all these ideas from part and parcel of being enslaved, from living among the Egyptians, and all kinds of other stuff that they have to abandon. And what better place to try and abandon those ideas than in a place that is abandoned, as you said, is ownerless. So they could learn now the new ideas and begin to incorporate them into their own being, their own way of doing things. And that too is part of that 40 years, because it takes time. It's not easy to say, oh, yeah, no, I know it has to be this way. To throw that away and say, well, maybe not so much. It could be a little bit of that too. It's very hard to do.
So true. Alan, you're traveling right now, so I know you've done a very amazing trip. I think that's like what's amazing is like when you go out of your quote unquote comfort place, that's often where you grow the most. But it's also it's very hard. Now you're having a great trip.
It is very hard. And as traveling, if any of you have ever traveled, you'll often see a certain group of Americans that as soon as they go to a foreign place, they head for McDonald's, they head for KFC, because they have to have the food they know. But there's something really liberating in trying the local food.
Exactly. That's right. And I'll tell you, I threw out the issue of bar mitzvah, the 13-year-old age, I think is so profound. I'm not the first one to say this. It's been said by many people, because 13, 13 is not, we can argue different ages, but if at 18, already the child is really much more of an adult and owned per se by themselves. Below 13, they're owned by the parent. In that in between 13 to 16, for those that have had teenagers or work with them, they're owned by something. It's not 100% because clearly they're under ages of their parents. But I'm saying it's like they're kind of in between. They're like you kind of want to abandon them, You know what I'm saying? Kind of joking, kind of not. But really, it's like it's an interesting in-between moment of that transition where they're trying to assert their own, but they're also not sure yet. You're stuck. I also say the idea of beginner's mind is so powerful. When I try to do something new, learn a new language, I have a fantasy. I want to learn Spanish. I've learned it. It's so hard. That beginning part is so hard. But it's also the time where you grow the most. It's so exciting in a certain way. but it's also really hard. A new exercise or do some new physical exercise. This is what makes it tough, but that's also what makes you grow. So abandoned place can be the most unrooted place, but it's also maybe the most growing place. Maybe the most opportunity to actually receive something new is in an ownerless place. You fit. Yeah, Deborah says, yeah, the gesher. You fit, Deborah. I love that. Yes, the middle school class called gesher. Exactly. It's a bridge. Very nice. Sarah has something? Sarah first or no? We couldn't see Sarah raising her hand? No. Okay. All right. Let's see let's do, I'm not going to even go to other countries. You guys do it all. Let's go to this last one here. This is like another amazing one. It was mentioned before. I think Ellen mentioned we went 40 years in the desert. All right. But how many days exactly from Egypt to entering the land of Israel? How many days theoretically
40 years
should have it taken us? Instead of 40 years, take a look at what these first few verses of Deuteronomy tell us. It really should have been just by human walking. These are the words that Moshe addressed to all Yisrael on the other side of the Jordan, right? We're getting ready to enter through the wilderness and the Arava and Yersuf. This is parts of Israel. Paran and Tofel, Lavan. It is an 11-day from Chorev. Chorev was another biblical way of saying Sinai. It's 11-day from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir. I thought about putting a map here. It's like basically southern Israel. It's 11 days from Mount Sinai to getting to Israel. But instead, God makes us go 40 years. And what's the classic answer why we had to do 40 years? Does anyone remember the classic answer? No, who knows? I see some smiles. Ellen,
Yeah, the generation that just slaves had to die off, and a new generation no.
Exactly. That is that's number one classic answer. There actually is another classic answer too, but that's number one, Ellen. You're absolutely right. We had to die off one generation to start the new one. Do you have another ideas?
Isn't it the golden calf?
Exactly, that one too. You're fit. That we sinned in the desert, and God said, we're going to make you wander. Exactly. But then it comes this question the rabbi's going to ask is, but why rub it in so much? Why is the Devarim come back and say, come on, we got the punishment. We know we have to die off. Ellen's points well taken. It's a little like intense. Why in the first lines of the book of Deuteronomy are we reminded that we have to go that, or where we went, 39 years and 300 and something days extra. So it's not very nice, okay? Moshe said to the people, see what you did? The shortest known route between Chorev, which is Sinai, and Kadesh Barnea is the Mount Seir route, just like this ancient routes you could look at a map. And even that is only an 11-day journey. You, however, this is actually, I'm not going to, this is not even the, let's just skip to this bottom one. This is the one I want to focus on here. All right. That just the emphasis 11 days. Here we go. Check this out. With the receiving of the Torah, the heart of the people of Yisrael was not yet refined so as to be completely drawn after the will of God. They understood in their intellect that it was good to be filled with the will of God, yet their heart was not yet purified. Only once they'd entered the land was their heart refined. So basically he's defining here. He's saying, look, at Mount Sinai, we intellectually got the Torah, but we didn't get the heart of the Torah. So that's why we're going to wander. And look how he says, this is as Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, 11 days from Sinai, from Chorev. When you were in Sinai and you received the Torah, you thought that your hearts were already purified because directly after that experience, you reached Kadesh. You could have gone there in only 3 days. It could have been really, really fast. Yet your hearts were not yet purified. And we know this for the Torah says that the distance from Chorev to Kadesh Barnea is actually 11 days. I'm just going to skip over it. Just trust me for a second. This is not the main thing. Is the distance. Just keep going on for a second. And in this way, Moshe was telling Israel, you have not yet acquired the words of Torah that they may be fixed in your heart. It is only after 40 years by means of failures and trials that your hearts become refined. For, he quotes a line from the Talmud, one cannot uphold the Torah unless someone has failed in it. So what's his argument for 40 years? Is that theoretically we got we got the Torah very quickly. And we could have gone to the land very quickly intellectually. But it wasn't part of our heart and our soul. It wasn't inside of us because we had not failed in it yet. Because the only way to get the Torah really inside of you is to first fail in it. Then by failing in it, it's now part of you. And he argues it takes 40 years because it's going to take a long time to experience, I guess, significant failure to let it fully sink into you. You follow? Put aside the days for a second. I know I kind of skipped over that. Let's put that aside for a second. The key thing is the way you learn the Torah is by failing in the Torah. I love this. This is like the perfect thing for us perfectionists have to deal with. Okay, guys, come on. This is good. This is good. Like the best way we learn is by making mistakes in it. And why would that be? Talk to me. Well, talk to me about why is it that by failure and mistakes, you learn in a more profound way internally than other ways. Talk to me. Yeah, Deborah has something, and Ellen? Go ahead, Deborah, what do you say?
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, it's what we try to teach, like we preschool teachers try to teach the children, but more parents, that in trying and failing and trying again and figuring out how to make it work, because nobody can really tell you how to make it work, you make it your own. You take ownership for it. You learn what part of it works for you and what part doesn't, and you learn how to make that thing work in the way that best suits you. If you take that away from a child or an adult or anybody, then you take away two things. You take away their ownership of the thing that they're doing or making or experiencing, whatever it is. And you also take away their ability to roll with the punches, so to speak. I mean, you were talking earlier about this amazing thing that the rabbis did in taking this temple-based religion and making it an entirely non-sacrificial based religion. They couldn't have done that if they hadn't had the ability to try and fail. We only see what they succeeded in because that's what we have. But I'm going to guess there's a whole lot of stuff on the cutting room floor that we never actually got to see, right? But they couldn't have done that if they didn't have the ability to try something, throw it away, try something else. That's how you make something your own. That's how you take ownership of something.
Totally agree. So like a great teacher. Absolutely. All right, Ellen, and then Sharon. What do you say, Ellen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it relates to that. The best way to learn something is to make a mistake. You learn from your failures, not only what not to do, but maybe a better way to do something. I mean, the scientific method is really, when you get down to it, all about trying something, failing, trying something new, failing again. You keep modifying and keep trying, and eventually you come up with a theory, which none of them have actually been proven, but we know that the theory seems to explain what we do know. And every so often, something like Einstein comes along and says the theory of gravitivity is only a small piece. Now you have the theory of relativity there. So it's life is a process of taking a step. Well, maybe that was not the right step. So you fall back, you try again. That's life. It's change. It's how you grow.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, Sharon, what do you say?
Yeah, just following on the same idea. You know, I've taught preschool, I teach B'nai Mitzvah, I teach adult, sort of middle-aged adults, and I teach 80-year-olds. And no matter what I'm teaching or what age, it's the same thing. Like the students will say, yeah, I get it. And then they turn the page and it's like, oh, I guess I didn't really get it. What was that again? And I see it over and over and over. And it's really the only way to learn and to internalize something is to make those mistakes. Yeah.
It's totally true. I love you were such great educators in this class. It helps so awesome. I'm so proud of it. And I think Will, Mr. Larson, go ahead. I have an idea. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to throw a little mud in here.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I look at the people, wandering in the desert for 40 years, and God provides for them. He provides, he's their GPS. He leads them around. He gives them manna. They don't have to necessarily fend for themselves. And so when that happens, you become, I think, meek and weak, because you become very dependent upon the welfare of others.
Yes.
In this case, God. But I think what that does is it creates a lot of it gives you, when that happens, I think there's a lot of inner introspection, and it creates a disturbance within when, because I think most people like to be independent. Most people like to be in control. They don't want somebody else just leading them around. I mean, we're not dogs on a leash. I mean, that's not humanity.
So then, so your point then is therefore the failure is actually at least an attempt to have agency and do it on your own.
Yes.
You're fair. Right. To have the ability to fail means you should have the ability to try.
Right.
Right. You're fair. I like that. It's very true. Very true point. It's a great point. It's got no dirt in there. All right, Sam, what do you say?
I have never thought of this before, but I would argue that it's the ultimate immersion process. Okay, the food was provided.
Yeah.
That everything was provided. It gave you the ability as a people to literally take in the Torah,
yes,
to make it your focal point, to make it. And now we know they departed from it when they got to Eretz Yisrael, and they worshiped other gods, and they did all kinds of bad things from time to time. But it literally, 40 years is a big number. Everything in Judaism that has a 4 and an O connected to it is big. And it gave that people the ability to literally learn that which was given to them. So that supposedly when they entered the land, they entered with the kind of knowledge they couldn't have possibly had they been tilling the soil, had they been growing the crops, had they had all these other things on their minds. The Torah was the only thing that was on their mind, arguably, for 40 years.
It's like a super training.
It's really the ultimate ulpan, right? I mean, it's everything. It's your whole life.
Yeah.
And it made for interesting training ground.
No, it's true. We all had to convert in that process. We went through a journey of immersion, like a mikvah, I'd say, of going through that journey. Beautiful. Is Deborah saying? Deborah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would argue that the idea that we're hardwired to be individuals and act individually is a very Western Christian value. That there are many cultures where in fact that's not how people are raised to be, and they don't act that way, and that there's a very strong core in Judaism that that's not the way that we're supposed to be either. We can certainly look at our high holiday prayers. We say them all in the plural. We're responsible for the behavior of our entire community, even if we haven't done it ourselves. So I think that possibly part of the wandering in the desert and making the Torah their own was also to create a community, that they needed to be dependent on each other, not for food. God provided that. Not that they were going to, stumble around bumping into trees. God provided that, but that for the emotional and spiritual well-being of the community, they were all responsible, and they were responsible to each other, and that creating that community was part of why they had to wander in the desert. Again, we're told that they went in as a group of tribes, they came out as a united people, even though we know that's not true. They then crossed over the border and started shooting at each other, but that was the idea.
Totally, no doubt. It's an excellent point. The group concept, the community, the B'nai Yisrael concept, peoplehood, Am Yisrael. It's beautiful. Very, very profound point. So here, I want to throw one last thing out, and then we'll get toward our close here, is that I also want to say, I remember when I had years ago a conversion student who came to me and was talking about how they were excited to keep kosher, and they were starting to practice more keeping kosher, and they'd gone to some restaurant or Chinese restaurant, where it was, and they'd specifically ordered whatever foods that they would eat, but they didn't realize there was going to be bacon in it or something, and then they ate it because they didn't know until after. And the person came to me in tears, just so upset, and feeling so remorseful, really feeling like they sinned. I ate the bacon and I didn't want to, and it was by accident. I was like, real, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. We all make mistakes. It's okay. Obviously the person was I was very moved by their commitment. But the truth of the matter is, when you feel that mistake and that remorse of the mistake, it's very motivating to not do it again. So there is a good, mistakes are helpful in creating, again, and I think it's the point of some of the educators said here, when you don't let the kid make the mistake, they don't ever feel that feeling of the frustration, of the disappointment. And actually, it's okay. Even if it makes a child cry, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay for my son Natan to lose a soccer game once in a while. It's okay. because from that he'll be motivated to try more. If he wins all the time, it's this is part of the journey to explore and to learn and to grow. Like, and that's actually one of the powerful things about Yom Kippur. Like, we're all making mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. I'm so proud of our religion. Like, we're not encouraging it, but everybody does it, and there's a way back. But part of it is that remorse and that yearning to be better. That is part of the journey too. We can't not let it tshuva, exactly. We can't stop people from that feeling. It isn't a pleasant. When I'm disappointed in myself, if I did something wrong and I feel like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Why did I hurt that person's feelings? That's part of what sticks with you and motivates you not to do it again. But if you take that away, then you lose that motivation on some level. And it is a little bit of a negative motivation, but it's a motivation. So failure also, it doesn't feel great. I don't know if people like failing, but it motivates you to try to avoid it next time. And that's part of it too. You fit. All right, friends. Okay, we're gonna wrap up here. I see some Ronnie. We definitely have last. Thank you. Ellen was perfect. We had last week's program, last week's class, in fact. So we're gonna wrap up here. I'm gonna say one last thing before we go. Is that some of you know that this is totally just separate for a second, that last Shabbat I gave a little sermon about a program we're participating in called Resetting the Table. This is an opportunity to talk across differences in our congregation, people with different political perspectives in a very moderated way with moderators to really listen to each other and hear opinions from different perspectives, have civil conversations. And we're in the process of recruiting. And if you'd be interested in participating, it's all done virtually on 2 evenings, on a Sunday morning and a Wednesday evening. That you do it virtually with a small group of Beth Meyer members, where you share your experiences and your thoughts on political issues of the day, probably one issue in particular. It's a way to kind of build a better community amongst the different people, as we see it's the problem in Jewish people as well as the problem in America today, is bridging divides across differences. So if you're interested, you definitely can email me and let me know. We're definitely recruiting, and we're trying to find the right group of mix. But if you were interested, we're definitely looking to increase the numbers. So let me know for Resetting the Table. If you want more information, you can find it in the weekly email. There's a whole description of it, of what happened and what's it up. All right, we're going to wrap it up tonight. We're going to finish up next week with a couple more of my favorite Torah Mount Sinai stuff. Great to see everybody. Wish everyone a good end of Yom Ha'atzmaut, a good, meaningful Israel Independence Day. And we'll see you guys on Shabbat and stuff next week. All right?